David stepped off the shuttle, his gaze sweeping across the bustling market of Xyler's capital city. The air was rich with the scents of exotic spices and the vibrant colors of alien flora being bartered. As an anthropologist, he was here to immerse himself in the local culture, but the lively chaos of the marketplace was overwhelming even to his experienced senses. "Never thought I'd see an earthling here," chuckled a voice beside him. David turned to see another human, a man around his age, with the confident air of someone who'd been on Xyler for a while. "I'm David," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Marco," the man replied, shaking his hand. "Here for the sights, or something more scholarly?" "A bit of both. I'm studying Xylerian social structures," David explained as they started walking through the market. Marco laughed. "Good luck. They're a complex bunch. Stick with me, and I'll show you the ropes." As they navigated through the stalls, Marco shared tips on local etiquette and the best places to eat. David was grateful for the guidance and the company. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a minor commotion at a nearby stall. A Xylerian woman, with iridescent skin and eyes that reflected the sky, was arguing with a merchant. Her voice was calm, but her stance was firm. "That's Lyra," Marco whispered, noticing David's interest. "She comes here often, always ends up in some debate or another." Curiosity piqued, David approached the stall as the merchant, begrudgingly, handed back some currency to Lyra. She noticed David and paused, her expression one of mild surprise. "Not used to seeing humans around here?" David asked, hoping to start a conversation. Lyra's lips twitched into a smile. "Not ones who seem so genuinely interested in a market squabble." "I'm David," he said again, more warmly this time. "Lyra, you're a long way from home, David. What brings you to Xyler?" "I'm an anthropologist. I hope to learn about your culture, the everyday things that might seem mundane to you but are fascinating to me," David explained. "An anthropologist?" Lyra repeated, her tone curious. "We have our own scholars, but few take an interest in humans." "Well, I'd love to learn from them, and maybe share something about my world, too," David offered. "That could be enlightening," Lyra said thoughtfully. "Most of what we know about humans comes from old broadcasts and traders. Maybe we could help each other," David suggested. "I could use a guide, and in exchange, I can share whatever you want to know about Earth." Lyra considered this for a moment, then nodded. "I would like that. I have many questions, ones that old shows cannot answer." "Great. How about we start with something simple? Tell me about this market," David said, eager to dive into his research. As they walked, Lyra pointed out various stalls and explained the significance of different goods. David listened intently, his recorder discreetly capturing her every word. They discussed the agricultural practices of Xyler, the importance of market days and social cohesion, and the intricate art of Xylerian negotiation. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the stalls. David and Lyra found a quiet spot to sit down, where they could talk more privately. "So, Lyra, what's it like being a housewife on Xyler?" David ventured, hoping to understand more about her personal life. "It's an expected role for many women here, but it can be isolating," Lyra admitted, her voice softening. "Many of us seek more than just managing a household, but opportunities are rare." David nodded, realizing the depth of the societal norms Lyra was up against. "Maybe we can explore that together," he suggested. "Learn from each other, broaden our horizons." Lyra smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "I would like that very much, David." As the market crowd thinned, they agreed to meet again, setting the stage for a journey neither of them expected, rooted in mutual curiosity and the unfolding of deep cultural revelations. The following morning, David met Marco at a small cafe near the outskirts of the bustling market district. The aroma of Xylerian coffee, a strong, spicy brew, filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly baked goods unfamiliar to a human palate. "Morning, David. How's the cultural immersion going?" Marco greeted him with a broad grin as he slid into the booth. "It's fascinating, really. I met someone interesting yesterday at the market," David replied, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Oh, do tell," Marco prodded, sipping his coffee. "Her name's Lyra. She's a local, Very insightful. She's agreed to help me understand Xylarian culture from an insider's perspective. Sounds like a great contact. Xylarians can be pretty reserved about their personal lives. You're lucky, Marco noted, nibbling on a piece of spongy, green-tinted bread. David nodded, his mind replaying the conversation from the previous day. We're meeting today for a language exchange. I teach her English, and she teaches me Xylarian. That's a smart exchange. You'll pick up the language in no time with a native speaker, Marco said approvingly. Where's your meeting? At the public library. She says it's a place of learning and quiet, perfect for our lessons. The library was a grand structure, its walls lined with texts in myriad scripts and symbols. David found Lyra already there, seated at a table with several books spread out before her. Good morning, Lyra, David greeted her as he approached. Morning, David. I've brought some basic language texts, Lyra said, motioning to the books. We can start with common phrases and greetings. As they delved into the language lesson, David's pronunciation brought a few gentle corrections from Lyra and just as many laughs. They exchanged phrases, Lyra coaching David on the intonation and rhythm of her language. Your turn now, Lyra declared after an hour. Teach me something useful in English. How about ordering food or asking directions? David suggested. Perfect, Lyra beamed. I'd like to know how to be polite, how to mingle without seeming ignorant. They practiced phrases, with David explaining contexts where certain expressions would be more appropriate. The session was filled with light-hearted exchanges, and slowly, the barrier of language began to thin. David, can I ask something personal? Lyra ventured, her tone shifting towards curiosity. What's it like, your family back on Earth? Do you miss them? David paused, the question stirring a mix of emotions. I do miss them. We're close, but my passion for anthropology has always taken me far from home. I understand that, Lyra replied softly. Passions drive us to make hard choices. As they packed up their books, David proposed, how about we visit the Xylar Museum tomorrow? You can help me understand more about your history and art. Lyra's face lit up with genuine interest. I'd love that. It's a date then. The next day at the museum, as they stood before ancient artifacts and vibrant tapestries, Lyra's insights brought the history of her people to life for David. He listened intently, his recorder capturing every word, his mind weaving together the fabric of a society so different, yet so rich in ways similar to his own. Seeing all this, sharing it with you, it makes me think about how much we can learn from each other, David remarked as they paused before a depiction of an ancient Xylarian celebration. Exactly, Lyra agreed, her eyes reflecting a depth of pride in her heritage. And how much we're alike, despite our differences. Their day at the museum solidified a bond of friendship and mutual respect, each teaching the other not just about language or culture, but about perspectives and the universal experiences that connect all sentient beings. The following week, David invited Marco to join him and Lyra for an evening at a popular local dining spot known for its blend of human and Xylarian cuisine. The restaurant, a cozy place with a view of the city's glowing skyline, was a favorite among the expatriate community. As they settled into their seats, the waiter, a jovial Xylarian named Threx, handed them menus, his 4 eyes twinkling with curiosity at the diverse group. So, what brings humans and Xylarians together tonight? Threx asked, his tone friendly. We're celebrating our friendship and our successful language exchange, David explained with a smile. Ah, friendship. The best reason for a feast? Threx chuckled and proceeded to recommend dishes. While waiting for their food, the conversation turned towards the deeper aspects of their respective cultures. Marco, who had been on Xylar longer, shared stories of his first awkward encounters with Xylarian traditions. I once tried to greet a Xylarian by shaking hands, not knowing it was considered rude to touch someone without permission, Marco recounted, chuckling at the memory. It was an embarrassing lesson in personal boundaries. Lyra laughed, her eyes crinkling in amusement. Yes, we Xylarians value our personal space, but we're also curious about human customs, like your handshakes and hugs. David nodded, appreciating the complexities. It's fascinating. On Earth, those gestures are often signs of warmth and trust. The food arrived, a mix of Earth-style pastas and Xylarian grain dishes, allowing each to sample the other's culinary traditions. As they ate, Lyra grew thoughtful. David, Marco, she began, hesitating slightly, living here, adhering strictly to our customs, can be confining at times. I envy the freedom you humans seem to have, the way you explore and interact with the universe. David put down his fork, his expression turning serious. Lyra, if you ever feel too confined, remember, you have friends who understand and support you. Yes, Marco added. You've got allies here, Lyra. Plus, the universe is vast, and perhaps there are places where you'd feel less confined. Their words seemed to comfort Lyra, who smiled warmly at them. Thank you both. It means a lot to hear that. Sometimes, I dream of seeing Earth, experiencing your culture firsthand. Maybe one day, you will, David said, the idea sparking a hopeful light in his eyes. And maybe we could help make that happen. The evening wore on with lighter topics, but the depth of their earlier conversation lingered, enriching their understanding of each other. When it was time to leave, Threx approached their table with a complimentary dessert, a gesture of goodwill. As a thanks for bringing such warmth to my establishment tonight, Threx explained, placing a platter of sweet, creamy tarts on the table. Walking back to their transport after dinner, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement, David turned to Lyra. How do you feel about visiting a human art exhibit next week? It could give you more insights into our culture. Lyra nodded enthusiastically. I'd like that very much. Art speaks in ways words sometimes cannot. As they parted ways, Marco clapped David on the shoulder. You're doing good work here, not just as an anthropologist, but as a friend. Lyra's opening up more, and I think these cultural exchanges are good for her. Thanks, Marco. I hope we can help her find a bit more of the freedom she seeks, David replied, his thoughts drifting to the many possibilities ahead, not just for his research, but for the profound friendships he was forging far from home. David found himself walking with Lyra through the quieter streets of the Xylarian capital, making their way to the local cultural center where an Earth art exhibit was being held. The center, a large dome-shaped building with luminescent panels, stood out even among the city's avant-garde architecture. I'm excited about this, Lyra confessed as they approached the entrance. I've never seen Earth art in person before. David smiled, pleased by her enthusiasm. I think you'll find it quite diverse. Earth has many different cultures, each with its own artistic expressions. Inside, the exhibit was divided into sections representing different regions of Earth. They started in the European section, where paintings from the Renaissance period hung beside modern abstract sculptures. Earth art feels very emotional, Lyra observed, studying a painting of a stormy sea. Even your landscapes tell stories. That's a good observation, David replied. Art is often about conveying emotions and experiences. More than just beauty, it's about what the artist felt and thought. They moved through the exhibit, discussing various artworks and their cultural significance. As they reached the African art section, David pointed out a display set up for interactive music and dance from various cultures. There's an exhibit here where you can learn about traditional dances. Would you like to try? He asked, an encouraging grin spreading across his face. Lyra looked hesitant but intrigued. Isn't dancing a bit intimate? It can be, but it's also about expression and fun. We don't have to do anything too close, David reassured her. Deciding to embrace the moment, Lyra agreed, and they joined a small group gathered around an instructor who was demonstrating a simple West African dance routine. The music was lively, filled with the beat of drums and the melodic strum of stringed instruments. David and Lyra followed the instructor's movements, laughing as they tried to keep up with the rhythm. The dance involved a lot of arm movements and stepping in sync with the beat. At one point, their hands met briefly, and Lyra's initial tension melted away into the joy of the moment. You're quite good at this, David complimented her as they moved in rhythm. Lyra laughed, her earlier reservations forgotten. It's fun. I didn't realize how freeing dancing could be. As the song ended, they applauded with the rest of the group, both slightly breathless from the activity. Feeling more relaxed, they continued exploring the exhibit, now with a lighter, more playful attitude. I think I understand humans a little better now, Lyra said thoughtfully as they walked. You find joy in expression, in sharing parts of your soul through art and dance. It's one of our ways to connect, to bridge gaps between different people, David explained. Just like what we're doing here, learning from each other. Their last stop was the Asian art section, where delicate paintings and intricate sculptures offered a contrast to the boldness of the previous exhibits. Each piece tells a story, David said, echoing Lyra's earlier words. Just like each dance move can express something unique about the dancer. As they left the cultural center, the evening air cool against their skin, Lyra looked at David with a new appreciation. Thank you for today, she said sincerely. I feel like I've not only seen your culture but felt it too, through the art and the dancing. David nodded, pleased with the day's outcome. It's been a great day. Let's keep exploring and sharing. There's so much more to learn. As they parted ways, both felt a sense of accomplishment and anticipation for their next cultural adventure, knowing each encounter brought them closer, not just as friends but as cultural ambassadors bridging two very different worlds. David arranged for Marco to join him and Lyra for an afternoon in Zyler's Botanical Gardens, a sprawling space renowned for its collection of both native and alien plant species. The idea was to introduce Lyra to another facet of human appreciation for nature and perhaps deepen their intercultural dialogue. As they met at the entrance, Marco greeted them with a warm, ready to see some of the most exotic plants this side of the galaxy? Lyra responded with a curious smile. I am. I've heard about this place but never visited. It's different when you're exploring with friends. The gardens were a lush tapestry of vibrant colors and unusual shapes, showcasing flora from various planets. David pointed out an Earth section, where roses and sunflowers grew alongside less common plants like the Venus flytrap. On Earth, people often give roses as a sign of affection, David explained, picking a fallen petal from the ground. Interesting, Lyra said, gently taking the petal to examine it. Here, we have the Therian bloom. It changes color based on the mood of those around it. It's just ahead. I'll show you. As they walked, the conversation shifted to the topic of traditional Xylarian gardening practices, which Lyra explained were more about harmony and integration with nature rather than manipulation. Marco, interested in the technical side, asked, do you use any special techniques? Like genetic modifications or climate control? Some of that, but it's mostly about understanding the natural order and enhancing it subtly, Lyra detailed. Our goal is to coexist, not dominate. Reaching the Therian blooms, they watched as the flowers shifted from a soothing blue to a cheerful yellow as they approached, reacting to their positive emotions. That's incredible, Marco remarked, clearly impressed. Nothing like this on Earth. They continued their walk, stopping by a small pond where tiny, luminescent fish mirrored the stars above. Here, David and Marco set up a small picnic they had prepared, pulling out Earth snacks and Xylarian beverages. As they ate, David turned the conversation towards personal aspirations, a topic they hadn't touched on much. Lyra, you've shared so much about your culture. What about you personally? Any dreams you haven't pursued? Lyra was quiet for a moment, looking out at the glowing pond. I've always wanted to learn more about other worlds, not just through broadcasts or books, but by experiencing them. Like you do, David. David nodded, understanding the longing in her words. Maybe there's a way we can make that happen. I know people, programs that offer cultural exchanges. Marco chimed in, supportive as always. That sounds like a great idea. Expanding your horizons, seeing Earth for yourself. It would be an incredible experience. Lyra's eyes lit up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I would love that. To see Earth, learn more directly about your people. It's a dream I never thought could come true. As the afternoon waned, their conversation deepened, discussing possibilities and plans. It was not just a sharing of food and drink, but of hopes and the potential for new beginnings. By the time they left the gardens, a plan was forming. David promised to contact his university to inquire about exchange opportunities. Lyra promised to think seriously about what such a journey would entail. Walking back through the city as the sun set, casting long shadows and painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, they all felt a sense of camaraderie and possibility. This day in the gardens had planted seeds of change, growth not just for the plants around them, but for their own lives and futures. Weeks passed since their day in the botanical gardens, and the idea of Lyra visiting Earth became more tangible. David had been in contact with his university about setting up a cultural exchange program, and the responses were promising. However, Lyra's growing excitement was shadowed by the complexities of her situation at home, which until now, she had managed to keep private from David and Marco. David met Marco at a local cafe, where they were to discuss the next steps for Lyra's potential visit to Earth. The cafe was a blend of Earth and Xylarian aesthetics, a perfect backdrop for their discussion. "Any news from the university?" Marco asked as soon as David sat down, his voice eager. "Yes, they're interested. They think Lyra's participation could be beneficial for interstellar relations and understanding," David explained, pulling out a tablet to show Marco the email correspondence. "That's fantastic. But how is Lyra feeling about all this?" Marco's brow furrowed slightly, aware of the personal implications for her. "She's excited, but also nervous. Today, she said she would tell her husband about her plans." "It's a big step," David said, his tone mixed with concern and hope. At that moment, David received a message from Lyra asking him and Marco to come to her home immediately. Sensing the urgency, they quickly made their way to her residence. Upon arriving, they found Lyra in the midst of a heated discussion with her husband, Saren, who was visibly upset. Lyra looked relieved to see David and Marco, but also apprehensive about how the conversation would unfold with them present. "Lyra, is everything okay?" David asked gently as they entered. Saren turned to them, his expression hardening. "So, these are the friends who plan to take you away from Xylar?" His voice was stern, filled with accusation. David stepped forward, his demeanor calm. "Saren, we're here to support Lyra in an opportunity for cultural exchange. It's not about taking anyone away. It's about learning and sharing knowledge." Marco added, "It's a chance for Lyra to see Earth and bring back valuable experiences to Xylar. It could benefit many here." Saren looked between them, his gaze lingering on Lyra. "And you want this? To leave your home and go to another world?" Lyra nodded, her voice firm yet respectful. "Yes, Saren. I love Xylar, but I also have dreams. This is about personal growth, something I need to do for myself." The room fell silent as Saren considered her words. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice softer. "I don't understand this need, but I see it's important to you. I just worry about what this means for us, for our family." David sensed the opportunity to ease the tension. "Saren, this program is highly respected. It's a safe, structured way to learn and return with insights that could help others here. Lyra wouldn't be the first Xylarian to do something like this." Saren sighed, the lines of conflict easing on his face. "I need time to think about all this," he admitted, looking at Lyra with a complex mix of emotions. Lyra reached out and gently touched his arm. "That's all I ask." As David and Marco left Lyra's home, they felt a mix of relief and concern. The conversation had opened a door, but the path through it was still uncertain. "Think he'll come around?" Marco asked as they walked back to the cafe under the setting sun. David pondered for a moment before answering. "I hope so. For Lyra's sake. She's ready for a bigger world, and I think she'll make the most of it." They agreed to give Saren some space to process the situation, confident that Lyra's earnest desires and respectful approach might yet bridge the gap between her dreams and her responsibilities at home. A week after the confrontation at Lyra's home, David invited Marco to join him for a walk through one of the quieter parks on the outskirts of the Xylarian capital. The park, known for its serene landscapes and reflective water features, provided the perfect setting for deep conversations. "Has Lyra talked to you lately? Any updates?" Marco asked as they strolled along a path lined with softly glowing plants. "Yes, she did. Last night," David replied, watching the light play off the water. Saren is slowly coming around to the idea. He's concerned, but he recognizes how much this means to her. "That's good to hear," Marco said with relief. "It must be tough for both of them." "It is. But Lyra's determined. She's even started preparing for her potential stay on Earth. It seems like she's really going for it," David shared, his voice tinged with admiration and concern for his friend's bold steps. The conversation turned to the logistical aspects of Lyra's visit as they reached a bench overlooking a pond. Sitting down, David pulled out some documents from his bag. Here's the itinerary and some of the program outlines I received from the university. They're really supportive, offering her a comprehensive guide and mentorship throughout her stay, David explained, handing the papers to Marco. Marco skimmed through the documents, nodding approvingly. This looks thorough. They're really making sure she's taken care of. Have you thought about where she'll stay? Who she'll interact with? We've arranged for her to stay on campus in guest housing. She'll be surrounded by academics and students interested in interstellar cultural exchange. Plus, I'll be there to help her settle in, David said, a plan clearly forming in his mind. It sounds like everything's coming together, Marco observed. You know, this could really open up doors for other Xylarians if it goes well. It might even ease some of the tensions and misconceptions about Earth. That's the hope, David agreed. Cultural exchange is a powerful tool for building understanding and respect. Their discussion was interrupted by a message from Lyra, asking them to meet her at her home later that day. She sounded excited and anxious in her text, prompting a swift conclusion to their park visit. Arriving at Lyra's home, they found her in the middle of packing some belongings, her living room scattered with various items and digital books about Earth. David, Marco, come in. I've been sorting through what to take and what to leave, Lyra greeted them, her eyes bright with anticipation and a hint of nervousness. Looks like you're really doing this, Marco commented, picking up a digital reader loaded with Earth languages and cultures. I am, Lyra confirmed, pausing to look around her home. Saren has agreed to support me in this journey. It wasn't easy, but we've decided that this is important for me, and potentially for our community. David smiled, relieved by Saren's support. We're all here for you, Lyra. Whatever you need to make this transition as smooth as possible. Thank you, both of you. I don't think I could have reached this point without your encouragement and help, Lyra said, her voice thick with emotion. The remainder of the afternoon was spent discussing further details of her travel, from visa arrangements to what she should expect upon arrival on Earth. David and Marco offered insights and reassurances, helping to allay some of her fears. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the windows of Lyra's home, they finalized their plans. Lyra stood firm in her decision, ready to embark on a new chapter of her life, fueled by dreams of learning and discovery. Her farewell to Xylar was not a goodbye but a promise of new beginnings, and the hope of sharing her experiences with her world upon her return. On the day of Lyra's departure, David and Marco accompanied her to the Xylarian spaceport, a sprawling complex of sleek, shimmering structures. The early morning was crisp, the sky a tapestry of pastel hues as dawn approached. The mood was bittersweet, charged with the excitement of new possibilities and the pang of imminent farewells. As they walked toward the departure gate, Lyra carried a small bag, the sum of her worldly possessions she chose to take with her. The rest, she said, were memories etched in her heart, too vast to fit into any luggage. Are you ready for this? David asked, glancing at Lyra, who seemed to carry a mix of courage and contemplative silence. As ready as I'll ever be, Lyra replied with a determined smile. It feels surreal, David. To think, a few months ago, this was just a distant dream. Marco, ever the supportive friend, chimed in. You're making history, Lyra. Not just for yourself, but for all of Xylar. Who knows? Maybe you'll start a trend. Lyra laughed softly. Maybe. I hope others can see the value in this, to understand that exploring and learning about other cultures enriches our own. At the departure gate, they met the human liaison officer, Captain Jenkins, who was to accompany Lyra on the first leg of her journey. Jenkins extended his hand, a gesture of goodwill, which Lyra accepted after a slight hesitation, remembering the Earth custom. Welcome, Lyra. We're honored to have you join us. Everything has been prepared for your journey, and we'll make sure you are comfortable, Jenkins assured her. Thank you, Captain Jenkins. I look forward to learning as much as I can, Lyra responded, her voice steady, betraying only a hint of her nerves. David handed Lyra a small digital device. Here's something for the journey, a collection of Earth music, books, and films. It might help you pass the time, and give you a head start on your cultural immersion. Lyra took the device, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, David, for everything. You and Marco have been more than friends. You've been my guides to a wider universe. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal, a solemn reminder that it was time to part ways. Lyra hugged Marco first, a long, meaningful embrace that spoke volumes of their shared experiences and friendship. Turning to David, Lyra held out her hand, then reconsidered and pulled him into a hug as well. Take care of Marco for me, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We'll be here, waiting for your stories when you come back, David said, managing a smile through his own surge of emotions. As Lyra turned and walked toward the spacecraft, her steps were confident, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that once clouded her path. David and Marco watched her ascend the boarding ramp, her figure framed against the brightening sky, a silhouette of determination and hope. Standing side by side, David and Marco remained until the spacecraft's engines ignited, the roar overtaking the murmurs of the crowd. They watched as it lifted off, a brilliant point of light soaring into the dawn sky, carrying Lyra toward her new life and the vast unknown of interstellar space. Think she'll be okay? Marco asked, his voice lost in the rumble of the departing ship. She'll be more than okay, David replied, his eyes not leaving the sky. She's going to change her world and ours. As they left the spaceport, the first rays of the sun warmed the horizon, casting long shadows behind them and illuminating the path ahead. It was an ending, but also a beginning, a promise of new adventures and stories yet to be told.